What is going on, everyone? This is Eric coming at you from just outside Hartford, Connecticut. And today we will be discussing the Jake Peavy trade, which occurred on July 31st, 2009. Now, this trade was in between two teams, with the Chicago White Sox being the team that acquired Jake Peavy, and the San Diego Padres, who would acquire four pitchers, those pitchers being starting pitcher Clayton Richard, a pair of relievers in Aaron Porretta and Adam Russell, and just a pitcher in Dexter Carter. Now, why did these two teams do the trade? Well, at this point in time, San Diego was in a constant stage of rebuilding, it seemed. They were never gonna be good enough. They didn't have enough talented young players, similar to the Houston Astros at this time. So, whenever they had an asset, they would try to trade it. On the flip side, Chicago, remember, they're only 4 years removed from a World Series title. Now, nobody really talks about that World Series title because Boston had broken their curse in '04 and Chicago broke theirs in '05, so it was like a year after everyone was excited for one team. And it just goes to show you, and they were like, you know what, we're still good. We still have a talented core. They still had a good hitting core, but they thought, maybe Jake Peavy was going to be enough to push them the edge. Did it work? Let's look into that. So, obviously, like I said, we'll start with Chicago and Jake Peavy. So Peavy himself, he had a 4-year career in Chicago, and he was solid, but injuries did slow him down towards the end of his 4-year tenure, and he himself ends up getting traded. Now he's traded in this 3-team trade, and in this 3-team trade, I'm going to start with Chicago. Chicago acquires outfielder Avisail Garcia from the Detroit Tigers, and 3 players from the Boston Red Sox. Those 3 players are relief pitcher J.B. Wendelken, starting pitcher Frankie Montes, and shortstop Cleluis Rondon, while Boston would acquire the aforementioned starting pitcher Jake Peavy from the Chicago White Sox and relief pitcher Brian Villarreal from the Detroit Tigers, while Detroit would acquire shortstop Jose Iglesias from the Boston Red Sox. So we'll mention Chicago first because, that's what we like to do. We like to go one team at a time. So Avisail Garcia for Chicago, he had a solid 5.5 season career in Chicago. He was a good platoon bat, so he was very good. I believe he's very good against right-handers, I'm pretty sure it is. So he doesn't start every game because the splits for him are insane. He'll have a really good start against a righty, and then he'll just get beaten up by lefties. So he's not a true starter. But he did make one All-Star game for the team, and injuries did limit him later on, later in the 5.5 seasons. But he ends up walking into free agency, leaves the team, but still, solid pickup for Chicago. Now, the 3 guys they got from Boston, well, Frankie Montes, we mentioned him before in the Matt Latos trade breakdown. So he was traded to the LA Dodgers in that video. If you haven't seen it already, I would definitely recommend checking that out. It does discuss it. So you'd probably know who Frankie Montes is. He was traded to Chicago. Before that, I didn't realize that he had started in 3 different teams before he broke out in Oakland, but it goes to show you. As for Wendelken, he spent 2.5 years in the minors for Chicago before he himself was traded. And I mentioned Oakland. It was just kind of a fluke. Oakland got Wendelken along with pitcher Zach Irwin in exchange for third baseman Brent Lowry. Now Lowry, he had a decent half season of baseball for the team before he was cut. This was just due to his age, his salary. They didn't need him anymore, so they said, okay, goodbye. And last but not least, Cleluis Rondon here for Chicago. And he spent 4 years in the minors for Chicago before they just got rid of him. Some players just don't develop as you'd hope they do, and it makes more sense to keep an open spot for some of the young kids that you just drafted. And, I've spent 2 years in the minors versus 4. And that is it for Chicago. So how did San Diego do with their haul of 4 players? Well, Clayton Richard himself, not a horrible time in San Diego. He spent 4 years, and he had highs and lows, but he just wasn't amazing. He ends up leaving the team in free agency. Aaron Porretta, he has an unimpressive 1.5 season in the minor league system for San Diego before he gets picked up in the Rule 5 draft. And if you're not familiar with the Rule 5 draft, basically, I've mentioned it before, but I'll go into detail right here. Basically, it just means that after a while, your minor league players are eligible to be picked up by another team. And if the other team picks them, they have to keep them on their major league roster for X amount of time through the season. Otherwise, they have to offer them back to you, and they do have to give you money to take these guys. And of course, the minor leaguers, if they're on your 40-man roster, they will not be eligible to be picked. And they have to be, it's really weird. The rules are something along the lines of, they have to be in the minors for X amount of time. They have to have been removed from school for X amount of time. I'll do a video discussing the Rule 5 draft at some point. That's a real quick breakdown on that. As for Adam Russell here, Russell has an average half season before he's traded. And when I say average, I mean average. And he's traded in a bigger trade here. So San Diego would acquire shortstop Jason Bartlett from the Tampa Bay Rays in exchange for 4 players, the aforementioned Adam Russell, 2 more relievers in Cesar Ramos and Brandon Gomes, and an infielder in Cole Figueroa. Now, how did Bartlett work out? Not that good. He stole bases, but he really struggled everywhere else in all other categories. So they end up releasing him after 1.5 seasons. And the last player acquired by San Diego was Dexter Carter, who never made the majors. How did the other teams do in the Jake Peavy trade, other than the White Sox and the Padres? Well, we'll start with Boston. So for Boston, Jake Peavy, he had an okay season. And this, of course, included them winning the World Series in 2013. He had that whole thing with the Swan boats there, where they bought the Swan boat or something like that. And he ends up getting traded himself. So he's traded to the San Francisco Giants for a pair of pitchers in Edwin Escobar and Heath Hembree. So Edwin Escobar, he played very little in 2 months before being designated for the assignment. And Hembree, he's been a decent bullpen piece since debuting for the team in August of 2014. He was recently traded to the Phillies. Like I said before, I'm not going to discuss anything 2020 for these trade breakdowns. Not worth it. But he was traded to Philadelphia, so there's that. And of course, the last guy was Brian Villarreal, and he only threw 4 pitches as a Red Sox. So that can tell you right there how he did. Detroit with Jose Iglesias. So Iglesias had a good 5.5 seasons in Detroit before leaving as a free agent, and he was known for his defense. Now, he's kind of grown a little bit since leaving Detroit as a better hitter, as a better batter, but he's still an elite defender. So, solid pickup for Detroit. He was a good player on some garbage teams in recent years. Tampa Bay, since they're right in the screen for me here. Adam Russell, he got DFA, designated for the assignment after a half season. Cesar Ramos, he was decent, and he hung around for 4 years before he himself was traded. Because they are not one of the main 2 teams or in the 3-team trade, we don't go into that trade. Figueroa, he only made a few appearances before he ended up leaving the team. And Gomes hung around Tampa Bay for parts of 5 years. He kept getting promoted and demoted for parts of 5 seasons before he himself was finally gone. We shall go to Oakland next with J.B. Wendelken. So Wendelken, he was decent. He's been a bullpen piece for 4 years in Oakland. He's still there. So his WAR is subject to change at this point. And Zach Irwin, he never made it to the majors. And last but not least, we have San Francisco with Jake Peavy, who he played well early, but as his career progressed, he did get worse before leaving the team after 2.5 years. So that is the Jake Peavy trade. And for all things considered, the quote-unquote winners of this trade would have to be Chicago. They got a 17.0 WAR out of their players. San Diego actually got a negative 0.4 WAR, as, the acquisitions, these 4 players here got them only a 0.6, and Bartlett actually cost them 1. So Again, war isn't everything, but as for the other teams involved, Detroit did very good with the pickup of Iglesias for a 7.8 WAR. San Francisco got a 2.4 out of Peavy. Boston got a respectable 2.4 as well out of two players, I should say, with Hembree and Peavy. And of course, Peavy has a World Series ring to prove that he was on Boston. Tampa Bay got a 1.4 out of their 4 players here. And Oakland got a 0.6 out of their 2. Of course, that is subject to change. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Have a great rest of your day.